SVE Belanda listeners. My name is Romilda Elizabeth, and today I'm going to be hosting our podcast with our dear friend Yannick van Hierden, a change scientist at Griffith University, Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, which is considered to be top 50 world universities. Changing from having a life habit of procrastinating, drinking, lack of discipline, to inspiring a lot of people with his work as a change scientist, allowing people to seek clarity, to find meaning and purpose in their life, and to have a more productive lifestyle, as well as being more compassionate and more composed. Welcome, Yannick van Hierden. I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm glad to finally be able to talk to you through this podcast.
Thank you, Romilda. Wow, what an introduction. That is that is amazing. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Well, I
It's good
watched
to be
some of your
here.
videos. Yes, I watched some of your videos through YouTube, and then I was just inspired by it. And I
Mm.
thought there are so many good contents. Not only the graphic is amazing, your way of articulating things are also really good. And the content that you want to share with the values that you want to share to people are amazing too. So thank you for this opportunity, actually.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm. Well, the first thing that I want to say to you is actually a congratulations on your marriage.
Thank you. Thank you. It
Yes,
was
I'm
beautiful. Yeah, it was very nice to have that happen in these times. Yeah.
amazing. Yes, I'm sure that's also the cases for a lot of people. I know that COVID has been a way of basically postponing the plans that we had, and it's been difficult for some people, right? But then I'm happy that you got through it. But one question is that I know that you're originally from the Netherlands, and then you
Mm.
moved to Australia. What made you choose the decision to have an Indian theme right there? It's a
Ah,
beautiful, colorful
yeah.
theme, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was very different from what the traditional Dutch weddings and even the weddings in Australia. They're similar to a Dutch wedding, or let's say the bride wears a white dress and the man wears a suit. And the reason we decided to go with this Vedic theme was because when we came to Australia, we were introduced to this Vedic culture and the science of yoga and meditation philosophy. And we were really interested in that because we joined university and there was a talk at the university by this Vedic scholar, someone who was very learned in the wisdom of meditation and yoga. And we attended that lecture, and he pretty much he kind of tore down my entire foundation for where I was seeking happiness in life. And this may be jumping the boat a little bit, like maybe this will be an answer to one of your other questions, but that gave me a new perspective on how I was living. And then began to question my life, and I was like, hey, what why am I doing the things that I'm doing, and where am I seeking happiness? Is that really where it should be? And then he suggested this meditation process and this whole science, this whole philosophy of yoga and meditation. And that science stems from the Vedas. And the Vedas is this vast collection of books of wisdom, which answer, various questions on how to live a good life and where to find meaning and the science of identity and that kind of stuff. And so both me and Denise, well, my wife, we were really intrigued by that lecture, and we started to adopt a meditation habit, study the science of the Vedic philosophy. And then more and more we got interested in the culture as well. And you could see, well, you've seen the photos, like very colorful and lots of flowers and lots of music, and it was beautiful. So
I can totally see that. Based on your pictures, everything is so vibrant and colorful. Everyone seems so happy. Another point that you mentioned that really struck me was the big questions that you asked yourself. So you noticed that there was something that was missing in your journey at that time. So you started to question yourself. Why am I doing the things that I do? Could you probably share your story in detail? How in the Netherlands you started to um, realize that, okay, maybe this is the type of life that I want to change? And then did you have an aha moment, or did you have months of consideration to move all the way to Australia and decide what you're doing right now?
well, there, yes, That's a good question. I think there was a couple of different events that led to the aha moment,
Yeah.
and one of them was that for some reason, I lived like when I was a young kid. I was living a pretty normal life, not not too rebellious or stuff. I got into some mischief and stuff, but at some point I started to hang out maybe with the wrong people, got a bit of wrong influence, and I started using drugs and alcohol and a little bit more than just recreational use. Like people would have a phase. For me, it kept going on quite long. We started partying and and it got a little out of hand. If I reflect on it, the lifestyle was a bit too a bit too much of the enjoying sort of part. And at that time, I didn't really realize that. I was just kind of living in going through the motions, and I wasn't really questioning life. I was trying to seek happiness,
Mhm.
and I was trying to get all these experience, go to parties, traveling, do all these, try as many things as possible to sort of enjoy life, like live life to the fullest. We at that time we had the concept of YOLO. That was a really big concept, and it was kind of like you only live once, enjoy it to the max. And I was kind of embodying that lifestyle. Then at some point, and this was one like a little change that I realized, because I was smoking, I was drinking, I was like, this is not good, and I should stop smoking. And at some point I read a book on how to stop being addicted to smoking, because smoking is not just a bad habit. It's like an addiction, and it's not, you want to stop smoking, you want to stop being addicted, you want to be free, you want to be in control of your decisions. And that was for me the first, because I could never succeed with stopping with smoking. And so I read this book, and that got gave me some insight in how the mind works and how your perception is of looking at things, dealing with things, and whether it controls you, like nicotine or something, or whether I can control the nicotine. And then I started to, okay, I stopped smoking, and that was kind of the start of my change journey. But then at some point, I graduated my bachelor degree, and I wanted to do a master's degree, and so I decided to go to Australia. And when I was in Australia, then I attended that lecture that I mentioned, and that was the real aha moment. Because up until then, like at that lecture, the person, the Vedic scholar, he was explaining exactly how we live in the West, and he was pretty much describing my life. He was like, okay, we are told, and this is actually he talked about the story of how consumerism emerged in modern society, and he talked about a change in sort of in lifestyle and in consciousness in the masses from the early 1920s, where they actually spoke about changing society from into consumers, that the main purpose of people is to be a consumer of things, is to spend money, and that is what they should be doing. And that was because the second world they will have the First World War, and people like didn't spend a lot of money, but in the war they made lots of money because they produced weapons and stuff, and then that got blown up, and then they had to produce new stuff for all the businessmen and the bankers and the big industrialists. It was a great time. Then the war was over and people weren't spending money, and so they were like, how are we going to change that? We need people to spend more money on things that they don't need. And there's many people that spoke about this change, that we need to, like, there's this banker Paul Mazur who said that we must train people to desire things, to desire new things, even before the old has been entirely consumed. And so we must train, like, people's desire must overshadow his needs. That is what he said. And many people along with him. And advertisers began to match sort of people's deepest desires and values with buying things. So instead of buying a watch to look at the time, it was like, oh, you buy this watch and you get like prestigious and people respect you, and it's going to be great. And with same with food, it's not just to satiate your hunger, to live, to stay alive, but it was to, like Coca-Cola says, like open happiness and stuff. It's much more than that. And so people started to sort of do that, and go, try to fulfill all the desires and not think about the consequences. So short-term living, eating what you want, drinking what you want, like smoking, and all the stuff, everything, as long as you sort of fulfill all the needs that you have, all the desires. And I was living that lifestyle, and he perfectly portrayed how I was living, and I was like, oh yeah, wow, this is interesting. And I was studying marketing at the time, so he taught really how marketing manipulated people and advertising, and how that really changed society and how we lived. And that really got me then thinking, like, okay, wow, I'm living like that. Okay, but what is the solution then? And then he gave a solution, is to be in control of your desires, is to be in control of just acting whimsically, just like following the desires of the mind, and pretty much not thinking about what you're doing with your life, and just going through the motion, living on autopilot, just going for it, and then try to enjoy as much as possible, not being careful about what is the nature of the relationships that you have, like how do you maintain a good relationship with people, and not just focus on what you want for yourself, and that kind of stuff. And so at that lecture, I was like, wow, this is the way I have been living over the past 7-8 years. It was like, that was not such a good way to find meaning, because I knew I wasn't really happy. And it wasn't that I realized that in the Netherlands. It was just at that lecture I started reflecting. I was like, wow, my life wasn't it wasn't that great. And I was like, I want to seek a life of fulfillment and purpose. And so I adopted these principles, including meditation and mindfulness, and starting to, mastering my mind, taking control of my desires, making really good decisions, and developing relationships that keep in mind what's in the best interest of the other people and for myself, and not just looking at what I want in the short term. So it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but that's what you get when with the story.
No, that is exactly what I'm very, very happy for, because the way that you tell your story, I'm sure people are going to be fascinated by it. I was fascinated by it. And it was a
Mm.
beautiful insight for people to realize maybe that they have been living in autopilot. And for people that might not know, the term autopilot is basically living not necessarily based on your conscious self, right? Basically living on what the society tells us, what those advertisements tells us, just like what you just said right now. And allow me to break this down little by little. So in your case, with other people's case might be different, right? So some other people might be experiencing some other difficult things, and I'm sure you have a lot of clients. Now, what kind of autopilot behaviors that those people that come to you might have shared to you that might, that you can probably share to other people? What kind of hardships that they're going through that they should realize that this is something that needs to be changed?
Well, a really simple thing that everybody, or not everybody, but most of the people do, is that they spend a lot of time on their phone. And that is like, they have their phone in their pocket, and whenever there is a moment of um, let's say silence or boredom, or there is something that needs to be like, there's nothing happening, people immediately, when they're waiting in line or something like that, or in the train or wherever they are, it's like, okay, boom, immediately have their phone, starting to scroll on social media. And it's this passive consumption that happens. And this passive consumption means that you're not actively, I don't know, creating something or writing something or doing something, but merely consuming what the screen is suggesting. And the reason that, like, that is the autopilot, the reason that is a bit of a problem is because there's lots of thinking behind these algorithms in Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, that if you just let it serve you like all types of content, it starts to direct your life. It starts to direct the way you think. It starts to direct the way you speak, and what type of stuff you're interested in. And some people may say, hey, well, that's great, they find something that I'm interested in, but it doesn't really work like that. It tends to go to like the extreme stuff, and tends to polarize groups, and make you go down this rabbit hole of thinking that can be not so good. So a lot of the time, what people do is they move away from doing things in this world that are valuable, like creating things, let's say, with your hands, or having a conversation like we are having, looking at each other and talking to each other without being disrupted by the constant like ping. Like you have a conversation with someone, and what happens nowadays is they get a notification and they grab their phone in the middle of the conversation and they start a new conversation with someone else. It's like, that is what a lot of people do, and so they lose their attention, they lose their focus. And there is a documentary that I think, if people haven't seen it, The Social Dilemma, or if you have seen it, maybe watch it again. It explains a lot of these things, behind the algorithms, and how it influences people, and you're pretty much being controlled with how you spend your time. Like the devices and the software is designed to make you spend as much time on the platform as possible, because that makes them money. That is their business model. And you could say that's fine, they can do what they want. But yes, if you're influenced by that, and it distracts you from the things that you should be really doing, that give you meaning, that give you, help you to build good relationships, or live in a purposeful way. Because there's lots of studies that already now are connected with the more time you spend on these devices and social media, it has a negative effect on your mental health, your capacity to communicate and to build relationships. And so that's a concerning thing. So that's one thing that is a really important thing to start with. There's a couple of other things that we can go into, but I'll hand over to you.
I can totally agree with you. Let's just say if I open YouTube, I previously watch what I eat in a day. And what's going to show up is everything is going to show up what I eat in a day. And I'm going to watch that constantly the whole day. And it is not like as if I was asking for it, but they were suggesting it. So if I had another responsibility to look at, I would instead look at that. And so many of our time is consumed by those other things. So I think the first step towards that is to become aware first, right? Or by realizing, okay, this might not be what I need to look for right now, what I need to watch right now, and I need to move forward into instead looking at what my teachers told me to look at, for instance, right? But one thing that also you mentioned was that we need to have focus in these times during to make sure that our awareness is going to be implemented in real life, is to have focus. And you mentioned as well in your video that focus is basically the ability to one-pointedly direct your attention. Now, could you elaborate in this and explain how can we actually cultivate focus? Because we might be distracted by maybe the things that are going on at home, maybe there are problems, maybe other things that your friend did to you that you didn't really like, and you constantly keep on thinking about that instead of doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that definition is something that I concluded based on multiple sort of definitions and research that I had consumed. And there's four words that are key in there, and I don't want to go through all of them, but it is to one pointedly direct your attention. One pointedly meaning focusing on being able to focus on one thing. That is an important aspect of focus, that you're not doing too many things at the same time. And that's something that we are really struggle with, because we want to multitask, we want to do multiple things. And it's really, we can multitask, we can do multiple things at the same time. We can be driving, we can be texting at the same time, but it's dangerous. People make accidents, and we can cook and watch a video, but we overboil the spaghetti or whatever. And so we can multitask, but we can just not multi-focus. So it's very important to learn to just direct the focus on one thing. The other thing is to direct your attention. And that, I think, that is something that I think I want to highlight here is attention is your ability then to focus on something, to control your direction. And so to direct your attention means you can control what you focus on. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we think like and this is closely aligned with meditation, where if you want to focus on something, you notice in meditation that the mind starts to think of all kinds of other things. But it is for us a training to direct that attention. And a lot of people have lost that skill, that ability, partially because of when people think that they're bored, or when something happens, then people turn to the phone, and we find it difficult to pay attention because there's so many stimuli, so many things that come to me through a phone or through a screen or whatever happens. And being able to be aware of your thoughts, be aware of things that are happening, to learn to sort of step away from let's say not the technology. So let's not include any technology. Let's just consider just what the mind suggests. If we look at our mind, the mind suggests all kinds of ideas and thoughts and feelings and desires and hassles and worries and stuff. And we worry so much about things that may have not even happened yet and stuff. And so when all these things happen, then we easily get overwhelmed. But one thing that we should be able to do is to step away from that and to direct your attention on something beyond that, or to just observe and see what is happening and being not affected by all these things. And that is like brings me to mindfulness, is to be able to step away from the mind and to just observe what is happening, not be affected, let the noisy world spin around you, but just focus your attention, let's say, on your breathing, or on a spiritual sound if you're meditating, for example. And so that's a skill that helps people to then also be more focused in their work, in their studies, in whatever it is that they're doing in life, considering, contemplating on their life and where they should be going. And that's one of the things with the autopilot sort of analogy is you're living. There's so many there's so many stimuli that come to you through your screen or through whatever happens around you, that you don't have time to think. There's constant incoming stream of nuggets of let's say instant gratification, that you're always rewarded with stuff. There's always something happening, and at the end of the day you go to bed and your head is exploding, and maybe you can't even sleep because so many things. And then you start to think, then you start to ruminate and think about what happened. And many people have that. And so it's a good skill to be able to direct your attention if you want it. And that is also a really valuable skill in if you want to have a good profession as well.
Amazing. So related to this, I read a book called The Power of Now, and it's basically was explaining what you just explained right now. It has a huge correlation between each other, saying that when your mind starts to ruminate, basically you need to separate that sort of the thinker from yourself, because the thinker is the one who's going to ruminate basically a downhill of, okay, let's say, oh my God, I failed one test. What's going to happen? Am I going to end up probably jobless? Am I going to end up not going to graduate this school, and so on and so forth? And that sort of thinking is something that can lead to anxiety and so many other problems. But if you could separate that thinker from yourself, then you can realize that it was just a thought, and a thought is not reality in itself, right?
Mm.
And I'm sure a lot of people would like to know more about meditation. And how would you tell people who are just beginners, for instance, to start their meditation? I'm also sure there are a lot of meditation practices. The one that you basically just sit down and separate yourself from that thinker, the one where you visualize what you want in the future, the one where you cultivate more compassion. What kind of different meditation practices are there that you would probably suggest to people?
Yeah, there's plenty of different things. I think one what is a good distinction to make is that there's mindfulness meditation,
Yeah.
and mindfulness meditation is actually a pre-meditation technique. It prepares you to do meditation. So
Mm.
with mindfulness, generally what people think mindfulness is like being aware of what happens around you, not being affected by it, just remaining calm. And as you said, what you just described is to observe the thoughts and the ideas and the desires and everything that happens in the mind. And what you mentioned as the thinker, that is what actually could also be referred to as the mind. And a lot of people think um, whatever is in my mind, whatever ideas I come up with, or whatever feelings I have, then that is some like holy thing that I should embrace, and it is always right, and that is a real reality. But there is a practice called mindfulness meditation that teaches us to observe whatever is happening in the mind. And you can actually, through a process, you can come to understand that you are separate from the mind. And it is interesting because I just released a video that may be interesting. I can share it with you. You can share it with your followers. But one thing that I mentioned in there is that you can understand that you are not your mind through the science of perception, because perception happens something like this: light enters the cornea of the eye, and then goes like the pupil directs the light into to the back of the eye to the retina, and then portrays like an image there, which sends it through the optic nerve all the way back to the visual cortex. And so an image is then produced in your brain. But the question is, who sees the image? The brain produces the image, but there is someone who is watching, who is seeing the image. And that is you.
Mm.
You if people would close their eyes, and they would, let's say they would look up at an object, they would close their eyes, they would see that object in their mind, and then they are watching that image. It's like a movie screen. You're watching something on a movie screen, but just if you're in a movie theater and you're watching a film, you are sitting in the audience, you are watching the screen. And so similarly, so you are not the movie screen, so you are not the mind. You are the perceiver, the observer of the mind. And once people understand that, and this is a really deep topic that you can speak days on, but let's say once people start to grasp that idea, then they can learn to not be so affected by some of the feelings that happen in you, where you're overwhelmed by feelings of worry or extreme sadness and whatnot, and you can sort of step away from that. And that is a pre-meditation technique. It helps you to take a step back from all the stress, and to be an unaffected perceiver of what happens. And then you can go into meditation. That is what the meditators, the ancient meditators, used mindfulness meditation as a technique to then go into the practice of meditation. And with the practice of meditation, what people can do is there's many different forms of meditation, but what I spend most of my research on was how where meditation originated. And meditation originated in what we now call India, and being described in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, and in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. There's all these scriptures that meditation is very described in a very detailed way. And one of the practices of meditation that is the easiest in this time is called mantra meditation, where you focus your attention on a spiritual sound. And you can do that through like individual meditation or group meditation with music and with stuff. And that's a really easy way to meditate, and that gives people an insight into it calms them. It helps them to just focus on something, calms them, and then slowly giving more insight actually into the meaning of life, and deep feelings of fulfillment and peace, and something that is really important for, like, most of us, we just want to be happy. And what we need to be happy is we need to be peaceful first. Otherwise, we cannot be happy. And so to become peaceful, this meditation is a really powerful process to feel peace, to not be so affected by anything that is happening. And when you sort of become more peaceful, you become more compassionate also to other people. You become more caring, more loving towards others. And those are just some of the things that happen through this type of meditation. And if people are interested, I can. There's a really beautiful guided meditation that my meditation teacher, or one of my meditation teachers, has created, that I can share with you, and you can share with anyone, like your followers, anyone who is interested in let's say doing such a meditation.
Yes, I think that would be amazing. I'm sure a lot of people need those type of realization to be able to be more aware, compassionate, and calm. Because I totally agree with you. I think a lot of people um, don't realize that happiness starts within themselves and that it starts from peace as well. Because I've heard this quote as well, which says that it's not necessarily what happened to you, it's how you react to them, right? And so realizing this quote allows me to meditate in a way where I realize that none of the external um, stimuli out there can affect me if I don't allow it to, right? And so it allows me to become more compassionate towards myself too, which is also important if I want to be more compassionate to other people. Looking back at your experiences in the Netherlands for around 8 years, you mentioned, and how did you look back at it? Because I know that a lot of people might look back at their past experiences and they think, oh, I should have done that, I should have done this, and they blame themselves. How do you look back at it in a healthy way so you see it as a learning process to get where you are right now?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that is, you really hit the nail on the head right there already. Is that it should be, you should view it as a learning process. And um, a lot of times people start to really like, either people worry about the future, or they really ruminate over what they did wrong in the past. And both are not a very good strategies, of course. But um, like, when you fall down, what you can do is you can lay on the ground, and you can be like, ah, I'm here on the ground now, and it's so bad, and bummer. What can I do? But you can also get up and just move on with life, and not look at, oh, I just fell on the ground today and it was so bad and all this happened, and you know that doesn't help you. What you can do is like, oh, actually I slipped. That wasn't too, that wasn't too clever for me, but maybe it was an accident. Okay, but maybe it was because I didn't tie my shoelaces. Then you're like, okay, all right, I should, now tie my shoelaces before I take a walk. I know this is a really maybe easy, stupid example, but it is much better to just look at what happened in the past. Like, you ask me about my life. If I look back on the life I lived, for me, the way I lived my life was absolutely necessary for me to realize that what I was doing wasn't the best for me. And I would argue that it's not good for anyone to live such a lifestyle. But you could look at it in that way, and you could be really bummed by it. But I am really thankful.
Mm,
It sounds weird, but I'm thankful that I had these experiences, because I now understand that these strategies don't work, and there's much better ways to live life and to find meaning and to live a good life. And that was an essential sort of learning process. That is the purpose of making mistakes, is to learn from it and to change and do it better next time. And you can make mistakes, a couple times before you learn it. Some people, they learn from mistakes. It takes them a bit longer, and some people immediately like, okay, I should never do that again. So yeah, don't be too hard on yourself. Be realistic.
mm,
Be critical. Be critical of what happened in your life, and you can look at, oh, okay, this wasn't a very good decision that I made, or what I said to this person in this situation wasn't so good. I should not do that anymore. And you can change the behavior, and that's fine. But yeah, give yourself some slack for mistakes that you've made, while also being mindful of not just waving it away and saying, didn't matter. Because yeah, it's good to reflect on what happened, and then use it to improve it. That's a good strategy. Yeah.
well, thank you, because that was actually a reminder for myself as well. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to hear that, to not basically judge themselves when a mistake, you made a mistake, but to look forward and see that as a learning process, right? And I have two probably last questions that I wanted to ask you, although I think there are so many things to discuss today. And I mentioned this on the first time, was that I wanted to know how to cultivate a good relationship with other people, and how you can communicate effectively. And for example, saying what you want to say without hurting them, and knowing your own boundary as well.
When it comes to relationships, I think one of the most important things to understand is that um, we should accept that nobody is perfect,
Mm,
and then we shouldn't, and that is in itself, that's a huge thing, that I can say this right now, and people will maybe not um, appreciate that. Like, I don't even appreciate that fully. But if we really accept that other people are not perfect, that if I want, someone to do something and they don't do it the way I want it to do, and I become critical of them, it's like, you can't really control other people, but you can control what you do. So when it comes to relationships, it's like we should have realistic expectations of other people, and that what they are doing, I can't control it. That's one thing. And they are not perfect, so they cannot always do what I want them to do. And so whatever we should be doing in a relationship is always focus on the things that I can do, all the things that I have in my control. If someone else is being not very helpful in what they do, or maybe not very polite, or maybe, whatever it is that they're doing, instead of you becoming critical of them, um, let's just look at myself first. Am I always polite? Am I always doing the right thing? When I started really embodying, really taking ownership of all the things that I want to see in others, um, I mean, it's like there's so many quotes I can now pull from, but one of the quotes is um, by Gandhi, who said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And instead of pointing the finger at saying, "Hey, you should be doing this," or "You should," or people always point at other people, and that is kind of like a problem in relationships, is where they think, "I know best. I am perfect. I am perfect. You are not perfect. You should change, and I'm going to change you." And that is like, even if you're in a relationship, in a couple, that is a fundamental problem of living a relationship. You should never look at it like, how can that person, become perfect, and then they can satisfy me. It's like, what can I do to help to build a meaningful relationship, because that is what I control. And if I do a good job at that, the other person will see that. The other person will realize that, hey, wow, this what you are now doing, like maybe you're changing, or the way in which you act or speak, it's like that is in a respectful, compassionate way, that people will see that, people will appreciate that, and they will then start to mimic that behavior as well. So, always, it's always kind of like thinking in any relationship is, what can I give, instead of thinking what can I get out of this relationship, how can this person make me happy, or how can this person help me to become friends with their popular friend group, or how can I get into a particular get this thing that I want, and I'm going to use this person to get it. Rather, we should be looking at, hey, how can I add value to this person's life? And then when you think of it in that way, when you think of it, how can I make your life better? Then wow, then the whole thing changes. And this is a huge, huge subject. But when we start treating our relationships in that way, thinking, hey, how can I help you live a better life? Then you experience a lot of meaning in your life, and that is actually what makes a lot of people more happy and more lighter in life, and yeah, just be more joyful, and that is, I think, a fundamental underpinning that people should consider when you navigate relationships.
I totally agree, because basically what you give is what you receive. I totally believe in that sort of sentence, and how I have implemented that in my own life, and how I have seen the changes of other people behavior toward me. And I see huge change in not only how they say things to me, but also in how they act towards me. So we covered a lot of beautiful topics, starting from um, being aware that we were not probably living the life that we wanted to live, into taking a step back, into meditation practices, into having healthier life habits, and how we can implement them long term. And one last thing before we are going to tell people how to reach you, what is your one favorite quote that sticks to you?
Quote.
Yes.
Oh.
I know there's
um,
a lot of beautiful quotes out there that I live up to and look up to, but if there's one thing that you can think of right now that inspires you so much, what would it be?
one quote that I think, um, I'm not going to say this is the number one quote, but for
Mm.
the purpose of answering this question, this is one that really stands out. And it is a quote by Laurie Buchanan, and the quote is, "Whatever you are not changing, you are choosing." And so, why that is so important for me, and I think for maybe for other people too, is that if something in your life is bothering you, and you know that maybe you're not living the best life, maybe you're not living up to your own expectations, or maybe you're not realizing your potential. Let's say you have a bad habit, or something is going wrong, or you're just not really getting where you want to be. If you let it be and you don't change anything about it, then you are literally you're choosing that as your way to live. And you, like, complaining about it doesn't help you. And
Mm.
then that's, unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. They complain about it and point fingers and like, hey, but really changing it for the better, then that's within your control, and then you can get these improvements. So if you don't do that, then yeah, you're pretty much choosing the way of life. So yeah, that's a really powerful insight.
Beautiful. I think that's very powerful also to me. And last but not least, how can people reach you through Instagram, YouTube, and maybe other social medias?
Yeah, there's primarily those are the primary two channels, Instagram and YouTube. Both, it's just my full name, Yannick van Hierden. And on YouTube, I produce more around, let's say, around videos around 10 minutes on meditation, on focus, on changing habits, on how to change behavior and how to improve your well-being with habits and tips, and Instagram shorter versions of that.
I highly recommend it. Not only, like I said before, the articulation is amazing, the graphic and the way that you visualize, and you have a visualization of how you wanted the video to turn out, and it turned out like that. I think it's beautiful. I,
Cool, thank you.
and I highly recommend it, guys, for you to watch it.
Thanks.
And thank you so much for wanting to share these insight with people and with me. And I hope that you are going to have an amazing day.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Romilda.